All right, everyone. Well, we thank you for joining us for our second installment of our Outdoor Florida webinar series. My name is Michaela Panariello, and I am the Outdoor Recreation Specialist here in the Office of Greenways and Trails at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Today, we're going to kind of kick things off from a quick word from our director, Eric Draper. So he's gone and made us a little video to introduce this webinar. So we're going to hear from him now.
Hi there, I'm Eric Draper, Director, Florida Park Service. Welcome to the second installment of the Office of Greenways and Trails webinar, Outdoor Florida. Today we're going to talk about urban trails. I'm speaking to you from a trailhead that was established as part of the development of an apartment complex. This serves the purpose of health and fitness. We're going to hear today about a 10-mile urban trail, Miami's Underline, which gives millions of people a chance to get outdoors and get some exercise and some fresh air. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your support for Greenways and Trails, and join us again next month for the third installment of the Outdoor Florida webinar.
All right, so with us here today speaking, we have Meg Daly from the Underline, who brought her 30 plus years of sales and marketing experience in all different kinds of roles, spanning from whether that's public relations, advertising, and even technology, to her current role as the president of the Friends of the Underline group. So with that, we're gonna let Meg take it away.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I can't see everybody, but I hope that you enjoy the next hour we have together. I'm going to share my screen, and if someone can tell me that you see my presentation, I can get started. You all seeing everything?
Right. Yep, looks all good.
Let's go. Welcome to the Underline. So our initiative is led by a nonprofit organization called Friends of the Underline. We're a 501c3, and we have partnered with Miami-Dade County's Transportation Department to transform 10 miles of underutilized land below Metro Rail, which is our elevated train, into a transformative project. And we're very ambitious in our goal setting, but we want to participate in transforming regional mobility, celebrating diversity and culture and lifelong learning. And we have a lot of work to do because going from an underutilized parcel of land, 120 acres, and turning it into magic and mobility requires a lot of effort, and certainly requires great partners. I'm trying to figure out how to advance this. So I think my slides are stuck. Let me see. There we go. So why are we doing this? I started the Underline project 9 years ago, almost. I had a bike accident and broke both of my arms, which actually ended up being a great moment in my career as a resident, because I ended up walking below our Metro Rail to get to physical therapy, and just saw all the dead space below Metro Rail and thought, why don't we turn it into this incredible urban trail? So the big idea, we all have a lot of big ideas, right? So mobilizing them and making them happen, is really sort of the hardest part of the job. But we see great impact with this project. We'll be connecting to 9 million transit users that already pass through this corridor, 250,000 people living nearby, working with 120 acres of underutilized space, and creating Miami's first multimodal corridor, which I'll get to. And Brittany was talking about our campaign, Nurture Nature. We're all in for nature. That's one of my greatest passions, is taking care of nature and making sure that we're restorative in everything we do. So why are we doing this project? Connectivity, having this transportation hub that connects people to Metro Rail, to schools, to anchor institutions and the neighborhoods they live in, improving cyclist and pedestrian safety. Many of you probably know that Miami is one of the most dangerous places to bike and walk in the United States. And this is a broad gesture to changing that storytelling. Equity, making sure that everybody who comes here has access, equal access, and feels welcome. Hey, and encouraging active transportation. I don't know if you guys track your steps. I do. And a lot of it's just moving around town. And certainly in the urban core, that's easy to do. But without safe places to do it, it makes it difficult. And then I'll talk about the return on investment, which has really supported the funding strategies for the Underline. Very early on in our process, we did a study by a group called HRNA out of New York, who've done Central Park, the High Line, these incredible urban parks. And what they really focused on was development potential of what happens alongside the green space. And it's good. I mean, a lot of building coming, introducing affordable housing and workforce housing next to these green spaces, and producing more incremental tax value. I get excited about creating a place that will retain businesses and talent in our community and certainly attract them. And that's because you're building a city that enhances quality of life and providing those amenities that young business people are seeking when they want to move to cities. They want to be able to have mass transit. They want to be able to walk. They want to bike. They want to be able to live next to these transportation hubs. And then certainly this equity piece, making this accessible to everyone. And I'll get to the metrics of the audiences we serve. Oh. Short and sweet. Over 25 years, $9 billion worth of economic impact. And that's everything from carbon sequestration to real estate value appreciation and development and job creation. So it's really interesting alongside this corridor. This footprint for the Underline goes back to the days of Flagler's train. So, you've heard about the wrong side of the tracks, the right side of the tracks. It's incredible with that footprint created back in the 20s because in census data, it still exists. We have served populations, we have underserved populations. It's really interesting that we skew a little young, and not surprisingly at all, we skew very Hispanic because, hey, we're in Miami. And then the household income is fairly low. Which shows that, living next to an still active train is not desirable to people. But when you connect it to walking and biking facilities and park amenities, it does change the entire desirability of this corridor. So we talk about connectivity a lot. And in Miami, we have a lot of work to do. We currently have one metro rail system, which was built in the 80s. We have a countywide bus system, we have trolley, but we have a lot of disconnectivity. There is a future plan to build out more mass transit corridors, including bus rapid transit, light rail, heavy rail, but the Underline will connect, it already connects through 8 metro rail stations, literally passes right through them. Like if you get off a train, you walk onto the Underline. But it connects to a southern corridor called Kendall, and then the new future 22-mile transit way, which will have a bike path adjacent to it. And then this little triangle in here called the Miami Loop. I don't know if you all have ever heard of the Atlanta Beltline, but that's rail with trail. We love them. It's a great project. We have 3 projects that will connect to make 22 miles of off-road biking and walking facilities. The Underline connecting to the future Ludlam Trail, which is a Rails to Trails project, and then the Miami River Greenway, which is a pathway along the river. But they all connect, producing 22 miles like the Atlanta Beltline. So since we started this project, I said 9 years ago we started it, we've been polling and asking people what they want. We did it with our master plan effort. We did it with our first half-mile design plan. And we've now also been polling and asking questions since we're now into phase 2. And it's surprising how similar the responses are. The first priority is safety. People want to bike, they want to walk, but they want to do it safely. So we have to light, We have to make sure that all of our crossings are safe so that people aren't like, what car is coming at me now? Welcome to Miami. And then we also have to make sure that they're safe at night, not just with light. So we have security that we've added to this facility. People want to move. You know, there's a small number of hale and hardy people willing to bike. There's a very big number of people willing to bike and walk if they feel like it's safe. And then sort of in very short order, people want to exercise, they want to be in nature, and many people just want to hang out. The total project is over $140 million in capital costs for construction. So we've been very busy putting those funds together. You'll see in there, there's a number of investments from the state legislature as well as SunTrail. But the biggest contributor is Miami-Dade County in the form of road impact fees. The reason that's interesting is road impact fees had never been used for a trail capital project in Miami-Dade County. So how did we do that? We had to do another study that showed that if you build the Underline, you'll be getting people off of a major arterial road called US 1 in Fort Lauderdale. It's called Federal Highway, but it's a federal road that is triple its capacity. And we said, we believe, and this study proved, that if you build the Underline, people will walk, they'll bike to transit, and we can reduce the roadblock of people to traffic by 5%, which represents a very large number. So people say, oh, well, road impact fees are about building road capacity. So by reducing the number of cars on the road, you're increasing capacity. And then we also have municipal contributions. So it's federal, state, county, and 2 cities. So we have a very big sandbox. We also have a management organization that manages and maintains, which a lot of people, struggle with. How do you make your facilities beautiful, not just when you open them, but the next day and 30 years from now? And we're working on a public art. We want to have a 10-mile outdoor public art gallery. And then we have to program this facility with everything from yoga to tech talks. And it's a great time to do it because people want to be outdoors. We have 3 phases. The first half mile opened in February of this year. The next phase, which is 2¼ miles, is under construction. And then the third phase is 7 miles long. We secured a federal grant that triggered completion of this entire project by 2025, making it the fastest moving project of its scope in the United States. So our first phase opened in February. It's a ½ mile long. It was done by a design team called James Corner Field Operations. If you've been to the High Line in New York, they were designers of the High Line and also a number of really amazing urban projects throughout the country, if not the world. And what I loved about them is they didn't say, oh, we're just going to build the High Line in Miami. They listened first, and a lot of the great ideas, the images you're going to see in a minute, are from people who came to our public meetings and said what they wanted. We have basketball and soccer and an outdoor gym that used just to be like an FPL building that would run their transmission lines. That's now our outdoor gym. We have a sound stage for performances. We have 4 public art pieces. And we've introduced a kiosk where we have entrepreneur activations, providing people a place to try their retail ideas. Many of them were just building their entrepreneur experiences out of their garages during COVID. So now they're testing out their ideas on the Underline. And the entire park is a pollinator, all 120 acres. The first ½ mile, we've added 30,000 native plants and trees. And then our next phase, phase 2, we have 100,000 new plants and trees. The entire park is dog friendly, and we have free Wi-Fi. So that's what it looks like now. Before, it was just dirt and no light, scary. I can let you use your imagination, the reasons why it was scary. This is called the River Room, where we connect to the Miami River. This is our outdoor gym. It is booked solid, and we've been using this ½ mile as a test. can you mix modes of recreation? We have, but we found that mostly people want separate basketball from soccer. So we'll have mini pitch soccer and basketball courts in our future phases. This is our multimodal corridor where you have two separated trails, always separated. It's the safest condition, dedicated bike, dedicated pedestrian facility. You see these big boulders, that's our bedrock, which is called Oolite, which the Underline is built on top of. We have a lot of people walking their dogs out here. And a little pro tip, once we opened, we had to triple the number of doggy bag containers. So if you're building, make sure you have a lot of ways for people to pick up after their dogs. It definitely incentivizes them. This is one of our first art installations. The scale of this is surprising. It's actually 70 feet wide. And it used just to be a bare gray wall. And this is a mural that tells the story of the Bahamians who were brought here to build Flagler's Rail. And the artist used the allegory of Plato's cave to tell how they, on the left, were in a cave. They escaped into and found their own community, and then enlightenment on the far right, and how they became integrated into our community. We have ping pong tables designed by an artist. There's two of them. They're called the water tables. That's terrazzo you see. This is really cool. People bring their own paddles. I saw them yesterday playing ping pong, and there's a drain in there. So when we have a big rain incident, that grid takes the water and then it spits out in sort of like waterfalls at the base of the ping pong tables to bring attention to sea level rise and climate change. Oh, we have had lots of stuff going on. We had 2 days of displaying urban haiku. We had a big jumbotron on our soundstage. We had an event where a local poet came and recited original poetry one night. We've had hula hoop dancers. We've had Miami City Ballet perform on our soundstage. We've had kids just so hungry to play. We brought out 750 adult-sized Legos. And now that's something we do once a month because the demand was so strong. People said, please bring the Legos out again. And by the way, programming 7 days a week, you need a very resilient staff to do that. So we're 7 days a week. We're open 24 hours, 365. We never close because this is a rapid transit corridor. We have had pet adoptions. We do that once a month. About 100% record of the pets we bring out get adopted. I have such a hard time getting my slides to advance. Okay, so phase 2 is called the Hammock Trail. Construction began in September. And it goes from the southern end of that phase 1 we just talked about down to North Grove. So we get into sort of this less urban, single family residential feel. We'll always have the separated facilities. We have 6 intersection improvements in this phase alone. We're becoming 8 adjacent to US 1. In our first phase, we improved 4 crossings. We added mast arms, we widened the crosswalks, we've added crosswalks, we've made them bright green. They're obviously a place for people to walk and bike. This is one of the challenges of mobility in the urban core. We're adding our first of many, many bioswales. So we'll be using green infrastructure for stormwater mitigation. And again, I mentioned that we're adding over 1,000 trees in this segment alone, and we'll have our first playground. Oh. So that's what this facility looks like now and what it will look like once we build. This is our playground area. It's all nature inspired. It's right next to a hardwood hammock. So our planting is inspired by the hardwood hammock, which is anchored in live oak, and then sort of its own ecosystem. And by the way, I was gardening this weekend, which is weeding and everything else. And we have so many worms on the Underline, which is good. The soil's working. We have 3 active butterfly species, monarch, sulfur, and the Atala. And the Atala is endangered. And in our first phase, we've introduced 8 endangered orchid species in our trees. So we will continue that in these future segments. This is actually a transit station at Vizcaya, which I don't know if you know Vizcaya, but this was the home of James Deering, and it's a museum and gardens right by the Biscayne Bay. And we have a labyrinth, which is in the shape of a U. And this is a great place to stop and hang out. Oops. I think I have a lot more to talk about. I was having some trouble with my screen advancing. So I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about, what our next phases are. We have third phase is in procurement, and I had talked about that. The phase 2 and phase 3 are design build, and the 7-mile phase will be very interesting. Building it, we'll be crossing over 20 intersections alongside a major arterial. So timing that of when you have road closures and when you improve crossings will be very interesting, especially with the very aggressive goal of completing by 2025. So we are a nonprofit. We have an event on next week called Give Miami Day. We love any sort of donation. On this day, it's $25 or more, or if anybody is interested in supporting our cause at theunderline.org. We have 2 nonprofits that we lead, both Friends of the Underline and the Conservancy. So that is the end of my presentation, and I will stop sharing and I can answer any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Meg, for that presentation. I mean, I know I got messages of people saying that you convinced them that they wanted to move to Miami. So being a South Florida native myself, amazing project. So it looks like we have about 33 minutes for some questions. So at the moment, we will open the floor for people to put questions either in the chat or if you feel more comfortable asking them verbally. So shoot your questions at us.
I can see the questions in the chat, and I'm so glad you all asked. This is like my abbreviated presentation. On the question with disabilities, the Underline is built on universal design principles, fully accessible to people with all abilities. In fact, yesterday we had a meeting with AARP. We're going to be introducing a program for people my age, so I fit into that class. And we're going to be bringing in basketball programs for people with disabilities in our urban gym. Everything on the Underline, edge to edge, is designed to be wheelchair accessible. And one of the really cool moments that when the fences came down on phase 1 and we opened, we opened 4 days early because bringing the fences down took less time than anybody anticipated. And one of the first things I saw out my window, because I have a direct shot of the Underline, was seeing someone cross the Underline in a wheelchair. And that crossing was not ever there before. And it's really great. It's like all ages, all abilities. A personal story, my youngest brother was born severely disabled. And my parents, who are just sort of like activists generally, in the 60s did a lot of work at the state legislature for handicap accessibility, including everything from curb cuts to rumble strips to improve the lives not just of my brother, but other people who are impacted.
All right, it looks like we have one more question so far in the chat. Did you receive any backlash from residents specifically along the trail, and how did you deal with that backlash?
Yeah, so it's interesting because since it's 10 miles long, the one thing that's consistent is the trail. And always the 2 trails. So, and there is an existing facility there called the Impact, which is really a maintenance road, and sometimes very poor condition. In our public meetings, so this was 7 years ago, someone said something that was so weird to me. And sometimes they're so strange when people, like they said they didn't want the noise of someone running behind their home. And they live right next to Metro Rail, which is incredibly loud when it goes by, and US 1, which is a very loud, highly trafficked road. But I'm like, okay, well, everybody has a good concern and everybody has a good question. And so we said, well, what kind of noise do you expect that to be? Well, all these runners. And I'm like, well, what's the decibels? You sort of expect that to be. And then I'm like, well, we'll get back to you. And so we came back and said, well, the decibels of someone running is X, and the decibels of a car going by in the Metro Rail above. And they're like, good point. And so really what I found was that what helped me, I guess, mobilized me every day was all the positive comments. People were so excited about the Underline. And any of you in Central Florida, my sister lives right in Orlando, next to the Katy Trail. And there were a lot of people who did not want the Katy Trail. But people did not relent. The Katy Trail went in, and almost everybody has taken their fence down behind their backyard to open to the Katy Trail. So we have great stories to tell of other communities that have had success and been able to really sell through the vision of you're doubling the size of your backyard. You're greatly improving the safety of living next to an active transit corridor, and you're much greener than you are now. So yes, we had a few complaints, but they just were not. We always worked on making sure that the positives ones drowned out the negative ones.
Perfect. Another question is, do you at the Underline receive any property tax revenue from the properties that are abutting the Underline?
Now, these are great questions. I have a feeling that everyone on this Zoom is somehow involved with the Trail project. So the Underline is built on county land, and the county is our primary partner. And directly adjacent is municipal land. On the county land, we can only have the Underline without any, we can't build anything that's a permanent structure. So that's why you saw a cargo container for our entrepreneurs, because then they can wheel it away. Directly abutting 3 municipalities, and all those municipalities have different land use codes and different impact fee structures. What we do have is commitments from 2 municipalities to direct park impact fees of anything that's generated by construction that's built next to the Underline. So here's for example, the Underline's 10 miles north-south. Anything within a half mile built in the city of Miami, so there's like a geofencing, those park impact fees that are generated are directed to construction of the Underline. And it started with a commitment for up to $50 million from the city of Miami. But we were very successful in finding other funding sources. So the city of Miami committed $15 million. And since they created that funding source, they fully funded that bank account. And the city of Coral Gables committed $7 million. And that's unprecedented. I don't think we've had any stories that has where a city project has delivered funds to a county initiative. So it sort of shows the kumbaya that's happening. Now, I know this is a long answer. The second part to that answer is there is an existing TIF, which is a tax increment financing initiative, which is tied just to the transportation corridor. And we are working on having up to 20% of that TIF in that geo-fenced area, because the TIF is 26 miles in many directions, be directed to the Underline for O&M, for operations and maintenance. Sorry for the length of that answer, but you asked a really good question.
I'm sure they were appreciative of all the information. That's really helpful. So I don't see any more questions, but just for the sake of, I know you touched upon it in your presentation. You talked about maintenance. So how do you at the Underline go about, like you said, making sure that what you're providing to the community is just as beautiful and just as usable 30 years from now as it was day one? What initiatives or programs or anything have you implemented and are actively working towards to make sure that happens?
So the reason we've gotten to where we are so quickly is that, this is all I think about, and I've been a volunteer for 7 years. And I'm a volunteer as president and CEO and chairman of the board. And we now have put together a great team to operate and manage and maintain. So in about 5 years, we assembled the 140 million for construction. So if anybody was lobbying and advocating for the project, we would fly to Tallahassee. I would go to Washington, meet with city commissioners, mayors. And so we sort of had, this sort of singular focus with blinders on. And since we've opened, we do have an allocation from the county from 2 sources. One is bed tax, which is called different things in different places. It's basically a hospitality tax, which has been hit very hard during COVID. And then the second was sort of a general fund allocation from the county. So we are now working on having access to that TIF fund as an ongoing revenue stream. Another allocation, which is fairly creative, which could potentially come from the Underline being part of the SMART plan. So calling this a transportation corridor, legitimizing the facility as part of that mass transit system, being the first multimodal corridor. And so we're trying to assemble 80% of the funding for operations and maintenance to come from public sources, 20% to come from private sources in the form of naming rights and donor recognition, minimum 5-year commitment. But 100% of our programming dollars have to come from private sources. So we have developers committing, we have FPL underwriting programs, we have partnerships. So it's a very complicated matrix on the programming side, and also the bulk of the public art is from private donations. So it's an 80-20 formula, public-private. As soon as we get it figured out and put into a playbook, I'm happy to share that with anybody who wants it.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, a lot of your work is kind of mixing public and private and working with this split between public and private entities. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are here at this webinar today have had to experience that. When you were first starting out, what were some of the things that you learned when it came to this mix of public and private that was able to optimize and create a more efficient way to increase funding, increase programming, and really get across what you're trying to do when, I'm sure everyone's had to experience the navigating of the split between public and private can be a little tumultuous at times. So when you were first starting out to now, what have you learned in regards to navigating that split?
So I think I can answer that best by telling a story. I had the idea for the Underline, and I went to my husband and I said, hey, I think we need to build a park and trail below Metro Rail. And he said, well, that'll never happen. So I'm not going to throw my husband under the bus. We're still happily married. But then I went to my father, and he was the founder of the Performing Arts Center in Miami-Dade County. And had great philanthropy, has donated millions of hours of legal time pro bono to many great initiatives. And he said, I think that's a great idea. So it's sort of, I think it's finding the right person to work with. So my father had access and could open doors. And then the other part of that story is at the time I went to the head of the transit department, and she said, oh, that's a great idea. You should go do that. And so the second part of this, I think the answer is that, be ready to be the champion and be ready to sort of own that title. Because because, you know, someone has to be leader. And if you're working with the public sector, you know, you have so many priorities. You have to make sure that all the engines and parts of that county and municipal and state and whatever machinery are working. But this is all we thought about. So I think that really helped. The third piece I would say is just being very opportunistic on funding, and not just get stuck on, you know, it has to happen this way. We were very nimble and always sort of had, you know, a bunch of balls in the air at the same time. I remember when someone called, and we did have one veto at the state, a state appropriation, and I got a call from one of our friends, you know, who also leads a trail initiative in Miami-Dade County. Did you see you got the veto? And I'm like, I had no idea. I have like 5 other things we're working on. So, you know, make sure you have, you know, a lot of irons in the fire, because not all of them will come home. And then on the public-private piece, I think trust and integrity are the most important thing that you can bring to your project. And I think the reason we have so much trust is that we made this a community-based project. So this was very grassroots. It was incredibly bottom up. And when you come to the Underline, someone is going to say, I was at a public meeting and I had the idea for that basketball court, and I had the idea for only native trees, and I had the idea for no irrigation, which, by the way, we are no irrigation. So I think trusting the public, trusting the people who say it's a bad idea, trusting the people who say it's a great idea. Really, when you go talk to an elected official, which in many cases alongside staff and administration have to get things done, it really brings a lot of confidence to your storytelling, because because others believe you.
Awesome. Now, do you at the Underline apply for grants, and do you have a full-time grant writer?
We applied for the Bill grant, which used to be a Tiger, a federal grant, which now I think is called RAISE. It's a highly technical infrastructure grant. The first year we applied for that with the county as the applicant, I and our pro bono attorney and the project manager at the transit department met at my dining room table for 10 days. And we put together the 30-page application, and we submitted, and we didn't get it. So that was asking, I think, for about $9 million. So the next cycle, the next year, we said, well, we didn't get it, and we worked really hard, so let's ask for more money. So instead of asking for 9 million, we then asked for 23 million, and just worked harder politically, worked harder in the community, and we were the only trail project that was awarded in that 2019 cycle. And so 2 years ago. So nationally, the only trail project. I can't say that I'm a great grant writer. I think passion, sells. So we're very passionate about our work, but you have to have the facts behind your storytelling. So that's why all the studies that we've done are really important. We do now have a grant writer, and it was really tough going during quarantine, because so much money was going to food scarcity, to just, survival grants. And so we were applying it in many places where, this is your wheelhouse. I can't believe, that we're not getting awarded. You're never defiant about it. You understand there's other priorities. But right now, since we're open, we're really seeing a lot of success in our grant writing, and we're, trying to increase our ask, but we're sort of the new kid on the block. So we start at A and hopefully get to Z in a couple of years.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Meg today? All right. So just to kind of cap it off, kind of a general question, but being that the Underline is the fastest developing project of its size in the United States and all that you've accomplished, if you had to give someone a piece of advice who is sitting here today who wants to bring the benefits of the outdoors to their urban community, what would you say is the first step of really getting the ball rolling in that?
Ask. Ask for help. It's fundamental to everything. And if you have a great vision, and there are so many great now supporting stories for projects like this. I mean, your staff, is a great library of those success stories. And so I think that I just think, just get out there, hustle, knock on doors, don't take no for an answer, and be relentless, because you're doing so much good in your community and for nature and for the future of cities, and for the future of, next generations, that, everyone here should be enabled to be a champion, because you can do it.
All right, well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have today. I want to thank Meg Daly again for her amazing presentation, all of that really educational information. If you would like to learn more about what the Underline is doing, you can always go to their website, which is www.theunderline.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can always feel free to email the Office of Greenways and Trails at Office of Greenways and Trails at floridadep.gov, and I will go ahead and put that in the chat for anyone who wants to email our office. We will be sending out a post-webinar survey after this, so please don't forget to fill that out so we can hear all of your feedback on both our topics and the webinar overall. So that will be sent out later today, and we will be sending out a recording of this webinar on Friday. So feel free to watch it whenever you want, or share this webinar with anyone that you think would really appreciate this information. Thank you again to Meg and everyone who came out today, and we really hope to see you at our next webinar, which will be on December 8th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And this is where we will be doing our Trail Town Spotlight discussions. We really hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thanks so much for inviting me, and I'd love to hear the feedback on this presentation, because we're always trying to be better. And I think we've got some questions about my contact. You can reach me at meg.daily at theunderline.org, and I'm sending that right now. Our team is an open book, and we are accessible, as I said, 24 hours a day, and we'd love to help out anybody in any way. Thanks so much. Come visit us in Miami. Bye.